On today's Transport Evolved, Tesla Model S cars as work bonuses, confusing the Chevrolet Bolt and Chevrolet Volt, and the Koch brothers support Tesla? These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 230 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Sunday, 1st of March 2015. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield. I am slightly croaky today, as you can tell. I might have to make that part of my deep husky voice. I've got a nasty bug that's been going around my family all week, and I was away last week in Oslo, Norway. I hope you missed me. I was driving a Tesla Model S all the way from Oslo back to London with a lovely, lovely Robert Llewellyn. We had a great time. There will be a video. In fact, I just dropped the video off at Mark Chatterley's house today. He is doing all the video editing, so watch this space. But that was the reason why there wasn't a show last week. We're back this week. We're covering kind of 2 weeks of news in one show, so I hope we can do it quickly and simply and concisely. Got two fantastic guests lined up for you today on the show. First up, all the way from a gold place, which is basically anywhere that isn't the west coast of the United States. Ben Nelson, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Now, you are in Minnesota, aren't you? Or Minneapolis?
Wisconsin, right next door.
Right, okay, that's it.
Close enough from an international perspective.
And it's really cold, isn't it?
Well, it all depends on what you're used to, I suppose. I think it's about 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside, but the sun's been poking out a little bit. Certainly, if you do a lot of do-it-yourself projects, it's nice to have a heated garage or some sort of a workspace like that. Otherwise, working in the driveway gets bad when you start losing your tools under the snow.
Ooh. Ouch! Losing your tools under the snow. Now, I've been watching some of your videos, which we'll come up to later on in about 5 minutes' time. And I noticed your driver was completely clear. But something, maybe we can talk about this in a minute. There's a guy on the internet who has built a radio-controlled 3D printed snowblower that fits onto his toy. Have you seen that, Ben?
There's been a lot of cool little projects like that. People have built little track or tread powered machines for snow plowing, or I've even seen things where people would take a Roomba vacuum cleaner robot and modify it to do different things. Cool. So it's a lot of fun stuff. I've actually been playing with robots a little bit lately. I've been trying to teach myself microcontrollers, particularly Arduinos, which are really neat little circuit boards. And I've got a 4-year-old daughter. So what we've been doing is playing with Legos. I found that you can make anything Lego compatible with hot glue. You just take for example, if you want to hold a marker, you can take hot glue between a clothespin and a Lego and make it hold that on there. And then with some motorized wheels, you can make a draw bot. So I've been playing around with some things like that. And the little girl has been having a lot of fun with lasers and markers and Legos. And,
awesome.
It's kind of a fun thing to do.
Awesome. I just want to apologise to everyone who was listening to that first bit from Ben. If you're watching the live stream, he was very quiet for that first bit because I accidentally muted him in my mixing desk. I've got a cold. I'm really sorry, Ben. The recorded version that goes out after this will be perfect. And I kind of want to just sort this out. Several people have noticed in the last couple of weeks, we have a live version of the show which goes out live. It's streamed live on the internet. It's only me in the studio. I'm producing, directing and hosting the show. And if there's a problem like that, which is caused by me, we record the audio separately and we record the video separately, and then we sync it all together in post-production. So the final version, which is uploaded sort of 10 to 12 hours after the show's finished, that's the one to watch, unless you're watching the live stream. And I know some people like to watch the live stream because of the live streamness of it. Anyway, let's go on to introduce our next guest on the show today, someone who never has to worry about snow, because he lives in San Francisco. The wonderful Mr. Mark Geller. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Hello, Nikki, and hello, Ben.
You don't ever have to worry about snow, do you?
Nope, not unless I leave San Francisco. And I did have to worry about snow when I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. And it, in the course of the time I was there, never got above freezing. It was between 0 and about 28 degrees the whole time.
That's bad.
Yes, but everyone seems to be adapted to it, and I quickly adapted and quickly got out of there.
So what were you doing in New York?
Visiting family. My parents are in New York. My brother is in New York. I am from New York.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. See, I always had you as a West Coaster.
Nope.
So let's talk about what you've been up to lately. Ben, you've been really busy working on a Vectrix bike. Now, you're known for your DIY skills, and in the last couple of months, you've been working on resurrecting a Vectrex VX1 electric scooter, which is, for those who don't know, it's a 2-seat maxi scooter style thing that was produced for about 4 or 5 years, and then the company went out of business, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty neat motorcycle. I picked it up for $400, which is pretty cool. I heard about it, called the guy up, and said, "Hey, I'll take it." And it was a bit of a ride to go get it. That was actually over in Minnesota, so I did a little bit of a road trip. Actually, drove out there with my pickup truck, picked up a friend on the way, got the motorcycle, brought it back home. But the battery was just absolutely dead. Nothing. I took the whole thing apart. It's about a 150 volt battery pack, and I got two volts total for everything. So I put some work into it, kind of manually charging the batteries, got it up and going enough that I could have the charger in the scooter charge the batteries. Now, of course, at this point, the batteries were on the floor of the shop, rigged up with jumper cables, but hey, it worked, and I could spin the back wheel and everything. And then actually yesterday, I decided what I wanted to do was just put the whole thing back together and see if I could just take it down the street and back. And at least that way it's kind of packed up. And once we get some spring weather, I could work on it a little bit more. And unfortunately, after I got it all back together, it didn't run. I got a little 3-phase chirping out of it.
Oh, no.
Which
That's
I was
terrible.
pretty disappointed about.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
At least I had gotten it up and running to speak over CAN bus, which is neat because my experience so far has been on kind of do-it-yourself, simple vehicles, just basic DC motor controller, that sort of thing. But the Vectrix, it's like a full-blown car in that it has the CAN bus communication system and all. So I spent almost as much money on this video adapter right here as I did to buy the scooter.
Show us that again, because I just switched into this.
This is my CAN bus adapter, so this lets the scooter talk to a computer. But when I did that, it didn't give me any information where I said, aha, I got to replace this cell or that cell. And then yesterday, when I got the scooter all back together, and it wasn't working right, I thought, aha, I'll just hook it back up to the computer. And yet I managed to have left this at home. I'm working on that scooter over at somebody else's shop right now. So it'll be a little bit back to the drawing board, take it back apart, look to see what's different, put it all back together. But it's really a pretty cool bike.
Yeah.
It has planetary gearing. It's a 3-phase motor, seats 2. So yeah, in the video, that's a little time lapse of me yesterday. Very high tech. These batteries, it's 2 packs, each weigh about 100 pounds each. So used a section of chain as a battery lift to get them back into the scooter. But it's fun stuff, and it was cold but sunny yesterday, so I took a couple of photos out in the driveway there. It's a really interesting project to work on. Yeah, so I literally had jumper cables on there, but as long as you tape up the ends, make sure you're not going to short or anything, works pretty good. And yesterday would have been the last day I could have legally driven it on the road under the old registration too. So I was kind of hoping, but no luck. But it's just a little country dead end street, so I'm not too worried about getting pulled over.
Now, Mark, I know that you've ridden one of these before, haven't you?
I certainly have. We were quite excited when Vectrix came out. It was with nickel metal hydride batteries, and they were, the one I rode back in the day, it was really zippy. It was quite fun. I'm sure there are still quite a few on the road. And it was a little sad when the company, as many of these little electric vehicle companies do, ran into financing problems.
That's so sad. It's so sad.
So sad.
And These scooters do have kind of an interesting following. It seems like there's a lot more of them in Europe than in the States. But recently, there's been a lot of people doing battery upgrades on them, either with Thunder Sky lithium batteries, or more recently, people have been using Nissan Leaf cells. And 18 or 19 Leaf cells, they look like the machine was designed for it. They fit in there so perfectly. And a friend called me up and found me a lead on a crashed Nissan Leaf in a junkyard. And I'm kind of hoping I can just go over there and buy the battery pack off of it. Of course, that costs some money. But if anybody wants to go in on a Nissan Leaf battery pack with me, contact me. I'm serious about that.
And the URL is underneath your face right now.
There you go.
www.300mpg.org.
Stop over at my blog and say hi.
Now, Mark, you are very busy these days over at Adopt a Charger. For those who don't know, it's a charity in the US that promotes the adopting of an electric vehicle charging site, essentially, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, basically, Adopt a Charger is a vehicle to get charging out to locations, particularly destination locations like parks and museums that have often in the States been neglected and haven't gotten attention from folks who want to take a little excursion, maybe away from the center city to a local park. So we now are fortunate enough to have a grant from the California Energy Commission, and so we're working installing charging stations at these state parks. And in addition, though it's not our main charge or what's actually expected by the folks who go and sponsor a station, or by the Energy Commission for that matter, we make sure that we're providing an opportunity for employees to charge up a car as well, by providing level 1 charging when we can possibly do it. And in California, we have overcome a problem that still exists in with the federal government, which is a bill was signed last year by the governor that allows state employees to plug in without any concern about either tax obligations or the state government accusing them of stealing electricity during the course of the time that the car is plugged in. So, and I really feel employees are the place we can get some real uptake of electric vehicles.
Wow.
And so that's a main part of our project.
Excellent. We've got a question for Ben about the Nissan Leaf or the Vectrix. They want to know how far it will go compared to the original nickel metal hydride pack. Any ideas?
I think some people were saying up to about 80 miles on the Leaf cells. The original nickel pack for the Vectrix was, I think, around 50 miles. When I got the Vectrix, it went exactly 0 miles and wouldn't even boot up. Right now, with the current state of those original nickel cells that are in there, it's giving me an estimated 21 miles charge. Frankly, where I live, even that would be useful. But, just hop on and fly somewhere 80 miles away would be pretty fun.
Excellent. All right. Well, Mark, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about in the opening of the show. And that's a story that broke a couple of weeks ago, but obviously we haven't had a show since then. And it's concerning what I can only call as the strangest political bedfellows I've ever seen. Okay. Now, for those who are in the know, auto dealer associations all around the US are currently campaigning and lobbying their state legislature, their own state legislatures, to pass laws ensuring that Tesla Motors or any other car maker cannot sell their cars directly to customers within the state in question. Now, Tesla has become the kind of the evil poster boy for this among auto dealers, because they don't want Tesla to sell direct to customers. But actually what the auto dealers are really scared of is other car companies like Ford, BMW, GM following suit. Now, interestingly, Mark, last week or the week before, there was a letter that was sent to Capitol Hill in the US asking state leaders and legislators to support the open and free market, to allow Tesla and other automakers to sell directly to customers. And it's got an interesting list of signatories, hasn't it, Mark? Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, this is a case, there's often strange bedfellows in American politics, and here we have a case where sort of radical free market activists like the Kochs find themselves in bed with folks who are interested in clean energy and clean cars. So it's just one of those things that happens. Everyone's going to have to swallow the fact that they've got an uncomfortable bedmate in the pursuit of, in this case, getting Tesla on the road. I suspect the interesting question is how the Kochs have managed to swallow supporting a zero-emission all-electric car that so many folks, so many of its political allies have problems with. But then again, you know, the Kochs sell coal a lot, and coal makes electricity, and electricity drives these cars. So perhaps it wasn't as difficult for them to swallow as we might otherwise think.
The Koch brothers fund Americans for Prosperity, which is the signatory on the letter in this case. And they are signatories alongside the Sierra Club, amongst others. And the interesting thing here, I think, is that, as you say, the Koch brothers have funded anti-climate change denying, I don't know what you'd call it, climate change denying science, perhaps, if there is such a thing.
Sure.
And so a lot of people are kind of pulling their hair out in the green car and green tech world. Do you really think that we just need to kind of accept the help in this case? Is that the best thing to do?
Oh, I would say it likely is. It's a little strange, but you know, the truth is the auto industry probably does need shaking up, and one can understand historically why these rules were made at the time. Right. I suspect that the auto dealers, who are themselves usually a pretty conservative and very Republican lot, are a little disgruntled by the position being taken by the Kochs here. But it's perfectly consistent for the Kochs to do so, and it is not unreasonable for the Sierra Club or you know, folks and organizations who are interested in new technology cars, electric cars, to pursue other avenues of getting them out. It's quite evident and much discussed that standard auto dealers from you know, legacy brands are not the best equipped to promote and sell electric cars. They don't understand or use the technology, and often are behind their own customers in terms of understanding what's the best way to go forward. So it's an interesting meeting of the minds here, and hopefully it will have some impact on those states that are unduly influenced by their auto dealers with whom they have a great, long, and historic relationship, as with Georgia, and I suspect we'll get into that. We will
get into Georgia later on. All right, Ben, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that topic.
Well, you know, really, it's just that Tesla has been a disruptive company. I mean, they're doing something so different that there's all sorts of people going, whoa, what do we do with this? And for the most part, it's good. It's good to have competition. But I mean, it's not the first time that we've had a real upset in the automotive industry. I mean, when car loans originally came out, Henry Ford didn't want to have people have to buy cars with car loans. He was sort of a holdout on that. But it really turned the industry on its head once car loans were available. And then even something like in the 1970s, there was a little kind of a footnote in car history. It was the all-electric city car.
Right.
And those were basically sold out of strip malls. I know we're going to be talking a little bit later about some of these stores in Iceland. But what happened then, it was just a little tiny car, and they were sold by dealers, but dealers who literally only sold one car. They'd have just that one car in their showroom, and that was it. But there were some of those same disruptive things happened in that time period in the 1970s.
Wow. I didn't know about Ford now. You've every time you come on the show, you teach me something new. That's why I love you.
I've got all sorts of crazy trivia. I'm great for cocktail parties.
All right. So let's go on to Geneva now. Geneva Motor Show happening next week. Lots of weird concept cars, including this one, which is the Quant F, and this one, which is the Bud E, spelled Budii, and it's got loads of weird technology. Steering wheel moves over to the center of the car, etc., etc. What do you guys make of this? Is this actually a car that we'll never be driving cars like this, will we, Ben?
No, I don't think so. At least not anytime soon. A lot of interesting technology on that car. A periscope up on top, autonomous driving, the moving steering wheel, all sorts of neat things. Doesn't seem like something I'm going to be driving in the next couple of years. Although a lot of those features, they exist. Google's been working on the self-driving car stuff. There's so much that can be done with software. But really, I think what's happening, all these concept cars are to tease people's imaginations, just kind of think, oh, what if, and get people sort of excited about things. And certainly they've got a well-produced video that's fun to watch, but I think it's mostly just to kind of get us excited about cars more than anything else.
So you quite like it. Mark, how do you feel about this all? Now Mark's gone. Mark?
Oops, sorry about that. I had forgotten to unmute. It's a very professional video with lots of concepts that are very attractive. It's a very sexy kind of presentation. And my question about these sorts of things is always, who's benefiting from this? And so I don't know who these folks really are, who paid them to make this video, what kind of work they do integrating all of this stuff, and whether it has any practical application in the near term. I suspect not too much, but it certainly touches people's imagination and opens the door to new ways of thinking about things often. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind seeing it, but I don't think it has terribly much practical application for the very near future.
Okay, well, let's move on to another vehicle that we're going to be seeing, which is this is an interesting one. This is called the the NanoFlow Cell Quant F. Okay, and then it's got a sister car, which is called the NanoFlow Quantino. Now, the interesting thing about these two cars is the Quant F is effectively a direct descendant of the Quant E Sport Limousine we saw last year in Geneva. It's powered by electricity, but instead of having a battery pack, it's got two tanks which store electrolyte, and then the electrolyte passes over something akin to a fuel cell, in which an ionic exchange takes place, and that generates electricity. They're claiming stupid ranges for these cars and stupidly fast top speed for this particular one, 180 plus. Ben, will this ever take off as a technology?
Oh, it's certainly very interesting. It's something a little bit like a hybrid of a battery and a fuel cell. The fact that it uses liquids is interesting because potentially, at least theoretically, you could pull into some sort of a fueling station where maybe they would pump out discharged electrolyte and pump in some fresh stuff that's all charged up, and you'd take off again. But in practicality, who knows how well that would work? I don't know how toxic this stuff is. I don't know how difficult it would be to pump in and out of a vehicle. But theoretically, at least something like that can be done. The other thing I was wondering about is this: if you have liquids getting pumped around in your car, I know like where a gas tank is in a car, it's in a certain place for safety and the balance of the vehicle. And if you have liquids getting pumped around from one end to the other of the car, I don't know, do your brakes work better when you have a full tank than when you have a discharge tank? I mean, what's that do to your cornering? I don't know.
Well, you don't actually get rid of the tank, do you? You don't really get rid of the fluid. You just transfer it.
You don't use up the fuel. It's getting moved around and passed over kind of this fuel cell-like membrane. So it's interesting stuff, but I don't know exactly how it would work. On the other hand, it's liquid. I mean, you could potentially build tanks into your fenders or some odd place like that too. So maybe it could add to flexibility of design in the future. That could be neat.
All right, so let's talk about the Quantino, because this car is weird. It uses a 48-volt electrical system. Mark's raising his eyebrows. 48 volts.
Well, 48 volts. I mean, I don't know, what are we moving here? Is it made of some miraculous...
No, it's got 4 in-wheel motors, and it uses 48-volt in-wheel motors, and it's claimed high current, low voltage, which... goes against everything that anyone's ever taught me about electric vehicle motor design and electric vehicle design. And I suspect you too, Mark. You've worked on some cars in your time.
Yeah. No, it sounds surprising, and I guess the proof is always in the pudding. And the proof is also on how many other folks are interested in adapting these ideas and trying to get them on the road. If it solves a problem, if it makes it cheaper to get electric vehicles on the road, if it makes them safer, if it offers us something that we don't have on offer today, it's obviously something that should be explored and will be. But I have never heard of anything quite like this before.
Ben?
Well, my home-built electric motorcycle is 48 volts DC. I used 4 off-the-shelf batteries, and it works just fine. But I tell you what, if it was higher voltage, it'd be drawing lower current for the same amount of work. Now, supposedly, that fueling system is supposed to be well matched in terms of creating a high current, low voltage output. So, that's a very different fueling system. So if it matches up well with a lower voltage system and that works, maybe it might be the first vehicle where going to a more low voltage system does make sense. Who knows?
Oh, okay. Well, let's have an ad break. And if you have watched the show for a long time, this is where we used to have an ad break and ask you for donations. But this is now where we offer you a chance to tell everybody about our show. And what you need to do is tell your friends, tell your family, tell your co-workers, your cat, your dog, anybody else who wants to listen about Transport Evolved. We're the place to come. If it's cleaner, greener, safer and smarter, we cover it here on the show. And you can do that by tweeting, you can send someone to our homepage, all of those other fun things that just help out. Staying with Geneva for a second, Ben has got a fantastic picture of a car that is also going to be there, haven't you, Ben?
Yeah, with my high-tech graphics system right here. I'm just... talking to you over my iPad. I don't have a good way to show some graphics. So I printed it out. This is the Magna Mila Plus Hybrid that's going to be at Geneva. And what's interesting about this, a couple minutes ago we were saying, okay, who are the people building these concept cars? What do they get out of it? Well, Magna is it's not a car company. They're not Ford, but they make parts for all sorts of different car companies. And they've been doing some concept cars the last couple of years, kind of show off their capabilities. And I came across an article on this car a couple of days ago, and I went, wait a minute, I think I worked on that.
Wow.
What it was is a couple of years ago, I got a call out of the blue with a guy speaking in a German accent, and he basically says, "Hi, I'm looking for you. We want to bring you out to Austria, help design the car of the future." And I think it's like a friend joking around, pulling my leg or something. But no, it was actually a really neat event put on, sort of a private public partnership think tank with a business university out there and Magna to bring in a bunch of experts and help design the car of the future. And of course, I was the only guy in the room who didn't have a PhD, but nobody else was, just working on their own vehicles in their driveways. So I can't say the exact details because of a non-disclosure that I had to sign. But basically, we were helping design the car of the future, and just what my team came up with was probably at least 4 or 5 different patentable ideas.
Cool.
And I looked at this car and I went, holy cow, I think I worked on that. And I can't quite say for sure without actually seeing the vehicle and getting a few more details on it. But I just got to say, for all you guys out there on places like ecomodder.com and all the different do-it-yourselfers, the car companies are watching and listening, and it is pretty cool. I'm like, hey, did something. So I was very excited. So I definitely look forward to seeing more about this car.
It's a shame that Toyota didn't listen to all of those of us who built our own plug-in Priuses, because their car would have gone much further, much faster,
That's our family car. We have a 2004 Prius that has an aftermarket plug-in system on it. And, when the original Gen 2 Prius came out, I thought, wow, that's a great car. I can totally see myself driving one of those, used like 10 years from now. And now I am. And it's got a plug on it, which is how it should go. But really, with the whole do-it-yourself movement and the hackers and the makers, it's not just a producer-consumer sort of a thing anymore. There's a lot of open source stuff going on, and people hacking and doing software and building cars in their driveway are actually making a difference now.
It is awesome. It is totally, totally awesome. All right, let's move on with the other stories of part 2. Those of you who are watching, thank you for being so patient. If you're watching the stream afterwards, you'll go, what's she talking about? We had a major technical fault somewhere between the first and second part. We had to switch cameras around. So if you go back and watch the beginning of the video, you might notice I'm in a slightly different position because we had to rejig things around. But thank you to everyone who's watching, and I do appreciate you all in the chat room holding out for us. Part 2. We are going to be talking legislative things. Mark, Georgia has been probably one of the most proactive states promoting plug-in and alternative vehicles over the last couple of years. In fact, Georgia is the largest market in the US, the fastest growing market now in the US for the Nissan Leaf, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, Georgia is the proof that if you offer some incentives in dollar terms for vehicles, it's likely to have consequences in people purchasing the vehicle. And Georgia, unexpectedly to many of the car companies, I suspect, and perhaps even to some EV advocates, has proven to be a very strong market for electric cars, most specifically the Nissan Leaf. Right. Georgia has a $5,000 incentive rebate. I'm not exactly sure how they give you the money, but on the car. And,
it's a tax credit. It's just like the federal tax credit.
Okay, it's an additional tax credit, so it's a state tax credit,
yeah.
As the $7,500 federal tax credit. And not surprisingly, there are conservatives, Republicans who are opposed to taking those kinds of initiatives to move electric cars into the mainstream.
Yep.
And in this case, some games were played in the legislature. A bill, the submission of a bill that had been defeated in committee, I believe,
yep.
Was then resubmitted after all the Democrats had left the room, and at least it's heading towards the possibility of being voted on, and it's putting in jeopardy the tax credit in Georgia. This is the sort of thing that Plug in America, a group I'm on the board of, full disclosure, takes very seriously, and we always move to agitate and activate our supporter base in various locations when issues like this come up, whether we're asking them to proactively help pass a bill or stop a bad bill such as this from passing.
Right. We
get a significant response, and legislators are responsive to their constituents.
Now, we should probably note at this point that there's two bills in question. There was HB 122, I think, House Bill 122, which was suggested last year, and it died on the floor. It didn't get voted on before the end of the session. And that would have basically cut all electric car tax credits, any tax credits for any alternative fuel vehicles, on July 1st this year. It died at the end of last year. It was reintroduced at the beginning of this year. As you say, it went to the Ways and Means Committee, and it was tabled by the Ways and Means Committee 2 weeks ago, and then resurfaced this week and was voted on when there was not a single Democrat in the House, which that's not the nice bit. But there's another bill going through at the moment, which is House Bill 220, I believe, and that would propose having incentives for alternative fueled vehicles, but now lowering that from the $5,000 that it currently is for electric cars down to $3,000, but to include plug-in hybrids as well. Excuse me. And that would slowly be tiered out as more electric vehicles and plug-in vehicles came to market. It would also, I think, include other zero emissions or ultra low emissions vehicles. Very similar to what California's been doing over the last couple of years, because California's incentives used to be far bigger than they are currently, right?
Yeah, and it's a familiar path to try and save incentives of various sorts that have been directed towards electric vehicles or plug-in vehicles as a category, and save the legislation by broadening the appeal by including other alternative fuels. This is it has different consequences in different places. The feds have a pretty great $7,500 tax credit for plug-in vehicles, and they are looking to try and combine it, perhaps, or at least some folks are, with natural gas and propane vehicles, and attempting to broaden the support for the incentive. Needless to say, I'm a pretty big supporter of carving out a niche for electric vehicles. I think battery electric vehicles deserve extra support because they sort of give extra social benefit. But these are political decisions, not rational decisions often. And so you have to cobble together the support you can.
Right.
If what they need to do is come up with a system to broaden the supports or ratchet them down, you have to make a full demand for the best possible incentive for plug-in cars and supporting electricity in vehicles. And then negotiations happen and you do the best you can.
Now,
hopefully this will continue.
Now, Ben, I know that if you're working as a converter or a DIY person, you don't get anything. So could you see this kind of thing working elsewhere in the US? Maybe if they included grants to help people who wanted to convert their own vehicles or do DIY stuff?
Well, if some governmental body wanted to give me some money, I would not say no. However, the number of people doing home conversions, frankly, it's not a number that's especially well tracked. But compared to the total number of electric vehicles out there now with the Leaf and so many of these mainstream vehicles, it's very, very small as a percentage. So for the home converters, it's not that big of a deal. Although I believe, for example, just south of me in the state of Illinois, I think even if you're a home converter, you get a $3,000 tax incentive, which is certainly very appealing. In general, I am for incentives that do things for the greater good of society. For example, most of us don't mind so much paying our taxes if they go to good things that we value, like, for example, roads. We all pay road taxes and gasoline taxes, but hey, we can drive to work, we can drive to the school and library. And I think really EV incentives are the same thing. I think battery electric vehicles are great. They're clean, they're quiet, they cut down on pollution, and they do us better as a whole in society. So I think having some incentives is good. And, just start them at first, have them for a few years. Once people really get driving EVs, they get hooked. I mean, that's what I always tell everybody. If you've never driven an electric vehicle, just go test drive one. You'll have a blast.
Yep.
It doesn't matter which brand or make or model or anything. You'll still get that EV grin. So just get out there and try one. But hopefully we can still have some incentives at both the state and federal level to encourage people to get into them in the first place.
It's all about driving up. It's also about driving up, kind of drumming up attention and interest, which ties very nicely in with the next story. So, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, at the start of the year, the Chevrolet Bolt concept car was finally showed in Detroit, and that's Bolt with a B. It was shown at the same time as the Chevrolet Volt, the new Chevrolet Volt with a V. And last month in Chicago, GM went, yeah, we're going to make this car. We're actually going to produce this car. But there's some confusion about the name. Apparently, it's causing a bit of a problem because people can't tell whether you're talking about a Bolt with a B or Volt with a V. But GM said, you know what? This is actually good for us. It's caused us to have a lot of people talking about this car that wouldn't have otherwise because they can't figure out which car I'm talking about. What do you guys make of that, Mark?
Well, if you do something dumb and you can spin it in a way, you got to spin. The point here is it's hard for me to imagine you sell a Bolt and a Volt, given that even just within the United States, the Spanish-speaking market for cars is millions of people, and you're going to have to figure out a way to distinguish. It's not a great name. Anyway, there are plenty of other possibilities for names, and I don't know what to say. I'm excited actually about the car. From my point of view, it fits into a neglected niche at this point, which is between the Tesla and every other electric car made,
Yes.
which all go about 80 miles in range. And the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. And if they insist on calling it the Bolt with a B, then so be it. They can call me up and we can try and brainstorm together and come up with better names if they like.
How about Volta? Volta and Bolt. Because you could name it after Alessandro Volta. Ben.
They're all sort of terrible names. Right. Speaking of Spanish, I took some Spanish in high school, and in Spanish, B and V are literally the same letter. When we would do spelling in my class, we'd actually have to draw it on the chalkboard to show which one we were referring to. But I'm kind of sick of all the puns. I mean, do we really need like the Lincoln Lightning and the Mercedes Megawatt? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, like when the Prius came out, it wasn't like the Toyota Hybridizon or anything like that. I mean, if you go back old school, Ford, they had letters. It was the Model A, the Model T.
Yes.
I think Tesla is doing it right. The Model S. They didn't call it the super duper electric, and they only make electric cars. So they didn't go with a bad pun name. They just gave it a letter. It's really simple. But on the other hand, what if we had electric cars as the main vehicles for the last 100 years, and somebody finally came out with a gasoline-powered car? We'd probably have like the Ford Flame and the Chevy Combustion, and I'm sure the names would be every bit as bad.
Well, of course, there was the Nova.
The Nova,
which of course, the Spanish people never wanted to buy because they went Nova. So, I mean, I get what you're saying. And I think we need to inhabit a space maybe in between the obvious names and the non so obvious names.
The one that really gets at me, though, is the Spark, because when I first heard of the Spark, I thought, oh, great, a new GM electric vehicle coming out. I got all excited about it. And then it was a gas car that they also make an electric version of, which just even makes it more confusing. So
does that mean, okay, so we've got Amp, because you've got the Ampera, which, okay, is no longer being made. But the Ampera,
there was a lawnmower called the Amp, too.
Sorry?
There was a lawnmower, an electric riding lawnmower called the Amp.
And the Bolt, believe it or not, is also in use in India. It's a car in India called the Bolt, which is a little low-cost Tata, basically, I think. So we've got the Bolt, we've got the Spark. We should now have the Coulomb.
Yeah.
Maybe the kilowatt hour.
Something with watt.
Yes. I mean, the kilowatt cycle, of course, which is a very famous drag racing bike. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the names do go on.
I mean, I think, was it GM that had a car called the Electra? I believe there was a Buick that was the Electra something or other. And since I think they've even killed the brand, or maybe it exists only in China, they really ought to make an Electra that's actually Electra.
There you go. There you go. Talking about getting people excited, though, and maybe confused. There is one way that they wouldn't get confused, and that would be to put both cars side by side in a showroom. Now, obviously, if the Bolt and the Volt do make it to production, that's what will happen, because they'll both be in a Chevy dealership. But now there's a new car dealership opened in Iceland, which essentially takes its cue from Tesla stores and Apple stores. It shoves all electric cars under one roof so people can compare and contrast and drive different brands of cars in the same place. Now, I don't ever see this catching on in the US. I've seen something similar in the UK, up in Scotland, but I'm curious how my American guests take it, because Mark, I don't think this would ever happen. Maybe it might happen in San Francisco, but I don't see it happening anywhere else.
Well, I think there are too many problems with it from the point of view of the car makers themselves. I think they would never let it happen. I think it would be I wish it would happen. I think it would be a great thing. In fact, part of the problem is that, people can go into a dealership and test drive one car, but most people don't know much about these electric cars. They don't know where to begin. One of Plug-in America's great efforts, and very well received, has been to do what we can to bring multiple car makers together in various environments to offer test drives to people. So we do ride and drives in many corporate on corporate campuses. National Plug-in Day is largely National Drive Electric Week. Excuse me. Now is largely an effort to bring multiple cars, multiple plug-in cars to one location where folks can just line up and drive an array of vehicles and start to learn the difference between a plug-in hybrid and an electric car, why a hybrid is not an electric car. What's the difference between a Volt and a Nissan Leaf, for example, and if you're lucky enough, even a Tesla. And we've had fairly good success at getting the car companies to do what they really essentially don't want to do, which is to hang around with folks from the other brand. They don't want you to think about buying another brand's electric car. If you're in the dealer and thinking about an electric car, they might want to sell you their electric car, but they might be just as happy getting you to buy one of their gassers. And, they just don't play that well together. In this case, in Iceland, for reasons I don't fully understand, it seemed possible. And I say more power to them. I wish them great success for all the brands in that context. Hopefully more cars will be sold.
Ben?
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense for Iceland. It's not that big of a country. It's only a little over 800 miles to drive the entire perimeter. All their electricity is almost 100% renewable energy. So they really have a lot of great things going for them up there. I think in terms of a store like this in the States, well, the Apple stores, they're pretty trendy.
Right.
I'd be all for it. I'd love to see something along these lines. I think the car dealerships, like Mark said, certainly they'd be the ones fighting it. I think some car dealerships kind of have been doing the bait and switch. You go there to look at their electric car, and frankly, the salesman doesn't even know all that much about that. Yeah. That certain model. Here, look at this Chevy Cruze instead. It's just as good. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's a completely different technology. But it'd be great to see something along the lines of, I kind of think of the Subway sandwich shops, this chain of these little restaurants, and they're all in these little strip malls. They have very, very low overhead. And I think it'd be pretty cool to have a bunch of car dealerships that maybe they just have a handful of electric cars there, but they could have very low overhead. And, another great thing is you don't have to be outside with an electric car. Turn it on. It's not going to have any CO2 coming out. You could have a indoor car lot. You could have indoor car rides.
Wow.
I've been involved with enough car shows where if you have a gas car, you have to drain the tank and go through a lot of trouble. But with an electric, you just drive right in. I was at an event in Chicago a couple years ago, downtown Chicago, brought my electric motorcycle, and they didn't have a loading dock area in this building. So I literally drove my electric motorcycle right up the front steps and into a TV studio there. And of course, I probably watched way too many James Bond movies, but it was fun. And it's the sort of thing that you just can't do with a gas vehicle.
It's true.
So who knows? Maybe we get some of these little EV dealer shops and malls all across America. We can only hope.
And I've driven zero emission vehicles into shopping malls before. I've done a display where it's the same, and it's that weird experience. It is very good fun. All right. Finally, for the segment, we're going to talk about the Mitsubishi i-MiEV. The 2016 Mitsubishi i-MiEV finally got its pricing this week. Unfortunately, it's not shifted from the 2014 model year. Now, there wasn't a 2013 and there wasn't a 2015 Mitsubishi i-MiEV. Now, for those who don't know, Mitsubishi i-MiEV is a small 4-seat city car. It's now effectively in its third reincarnation, depending on where in the world you live. So originally designed in Japan as a Japanese car, it was designed to fit in with the Kei Jidosa regulations, which is a set of regulations that defines a car must be under a certain size and under a certain power output in order to be parked legally on the street at night without needing you to have a special permit. And in Japan, if you don't have a place to park your car at night when you buy the car, you have to prove you've got a place to park your car or you've got a permit to park it on the road at night. And with a Kei Jidosa car, you don't need to. So the Mitsubishi i was originally, believe it or not, a petrol car or a diesel car. was then the iMeave came along, the electric version of that. They no longer make the internal combustion engine version, of course, in Japan. They still make the electric version. When it came over to Europe, it was redesigned for the European market because the Japanese version didn't meet European crash tests. So they made it slightly, the bumpers slightly chunkier, and they tweaked a few other things in the car. And then when it went to the States, it was tweaked again. It was made wider and taller and fatter to meet with NHTSA regulations. Now, Ben, you've still got one, haven't you, that was a salvage vehicle?
I do still have one. That's been an interesting project. I bought one off of an automotive auction site with water damage, which turned out that it was on Manhattan Island during the Superstorm Sandy. So I got this car, took it all apart, and literally the Atlantic Ocean fell out when I took off the battery pack.
Oh, dear.
So I've been trying to see if maybe I could find one that was crashed that I could put together with the one that I have to get a working vehicle out of it. But oddly, they go for a lot of money on auction. I don't know why, if it's just because there were fewer of them made, but it's just odd enough of a car. It seems like there shouldn't be much demand. So what I'm actually going to be going now is I did decide that I'm going to be parting mine out just because the electronics on it are shot, but it's got a gorgeous body. I mean, it was literally brand new on the car, brand new, absolutely brand new. So if anybody, and it's that purple or berry color. So especially if you're looking for a berry colored fender or door or something like that, swing by my webpage, and I'm sure we can work out some sort of a deal at market value if anybody's looking for parts. And in some cases, there's been people who've gotten into a fender bender, and it would take them like a year to get a new part from Mitsubishi.
Okay,
it's just like impossible to get parts for these things.
Because they were made in such small volumes. Or they have been made in such small volumes. They haven't really sold in Europe. My best friend's got one. She happens to have one that was a Japanese spec car that came over to Europe as a part of a trial to see if electric cars would take off in the UK. And after it had left the trial, it then became a privately owned vehicle. So hers is a 2010 Mitsubishi iMeave, and she still owns it and still drives it. It doesn't have the J1772 protocol for charging in. We're getting really nerdy now. Really? It has the socket, but it doesn't have the protocol. So you then have to wire an adapter to talk to a modern charging station.
Because the one that I have has both the J1772 and then the high speed, the Chatamo.
Yep.
So I was thinking and the funny thing is that was the only electronics on the vehicle that wasn't damaged by the salt water, because it's actually gasketed with the cap over it. So I may actually end up doing something like putting J1772 on my motorcycle or something along those lines.
That would be awesome.
But they're fun little cars, and they've been kind of overlooked as the ugly stepchild, but they're still EVs. You still get that grin. They're fun to drive. You actually have a fair amount of cargo space when you flip the back seats down. It's a great little urban car. And a friend of mine showed me a neat little trick is when you use the handbrake, it doesn't disable the electric motor. So you can literally pull the parking brake, rev the motor, and then drop the parking brake, and just about it takes off like a rocket, which is funny to say for this little goofy economy car. But it's kind of too bad they're a bit overlooked, because they're really much nicer than people think they are. Although that said, the first time I ever drove one, I thought, this is a great little car. It's too bad it doesn't have a big color display and more cup holders, because unfortunately, that's the kind of stuff that most Americans look for.
So let's kind of get into the meat of this story, which is, and by the way, my friend's one has Chatamo on it as well. I forgot to mention that. Cool. I think they all had it from start. This car hasn't changed essentially since it came to the US in 2011, and although it's dropped in price, I think it was nearly over $30,000 when it first came, wasn't it, Mark?
Yes, it was equivalent to the cost of a Leaf, and when the Leaf came out and announced its pricing, this just seemed kind of absurd. Its price has dropped significantly. It might well be the least expensive electric car on the market.
Yep.
I personally, like Ben, I loved the car. I love driving it around. I mean, I live in a city where there's a tremendous value to a car with a very small footprint, so that you can park in those spaces that 95% of the cars can't park in.
Okay.
You can kind of park in motorcycle spaces.
Well, this is Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say I don't know why it hasn't found its market either. I think it's a fit and finish issue. It just feels a bit like an electric version of a 1968 Volkswagen Bug, which has a tremendous amount of appeal emotionally for me, perhaps, but not for folks today. I'm disappointed at the low sales, and I would have wished that in fact they could offer it so much cheaper that it would fly off the shelves, because if it was really cheap, it would find its market as a commuter vehicle, I think.
Right, and this is the point. This is the point to this story. It's still so it's staying at 22,995. It doesn't have any of the bells and whistles that a lot of other electric cars on the market today do have. And it's got a small range, 65 miles. I mean, it's titchy.
And I think what's happened is they just really haven't differentiated themselves. There's no particular feature on that car that you go, I'm going to get the Mitsubishi I instead of something else because it has X or Y or Z. The main selling point so far has been the cheapest electric car in America. And frankly, in the United States, you seldom want to be the price leader. There's lots of reasons why people buy Coke and Pepsi and not the store brand of a soft drink. So at this point, they either need to do something a little glitzier or cut down on that cost quite a bit. Like I said, it's actually a pretty nice little car for what it is, but it's just for not a whole lot more money, you can get a Leaf or something else. Then, first time I drove a Leaf, I went, wow, I really like this. It's got this great feel to it and everything. Mitsubishi's got to do something a little bit different if they want to sell more of these cars. Either make them a little fancier or make them a lot cheaper.
Yeah. And I think that's the challenge now with Mitsubishi. I think this is going to be a car.
If I could just before we leave the subject, I mean, I think the question is what's Mitsubishi actually up to? Now, I think that Mitsubishi in Europe is in a somewhat different situation. I know that in Norway they sold an awful lot of these, both branded as Mitsubishi i-MiEVs and as Citroëns and Peugeots. I don't know if they're still selling or they're not selling, or which brand.
I saw some in Norway last week, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but I certainly understand that the Outlander? What do you call the
Outlander,
plug-in hybrid? The Outlander is quite popular in Europe, and it's something that we've been waiting for here in the States, and I think would be an incredibly popular car. So I think the question from my point of view is what's up with Mitsubishi in the United States? And is it just that there's no market here for Mitsubishis, they don't have a brand that will sell, and so it's not worth it for them to put their effort into this, but they need to have a bit of a presence? I just wonder what's going on. It's taking an awfully long time for the Outlander to appear here.
It's
a car that would be very popular.
It feels to me like they've been burned by the i-MiEV in the US, and they don't want to make the same mistake again with the Outlander. And I think I've spoken to several people in the industry, I'm not going to name them, who've basically said it's down to marketing. Marketing has been the failure. It's not been marketed in the US at all. And in Canada, where it was marketed much more imaginatively, they had that wonderful Electrophobia ad campaign. If you haven't seen it, go online and Google it. Electrophobia. They had this weird comedy series of ads in a very, very, very Canadian way, where they had overcoming your electrophobia, the things that you might be scared of, the silence, or you might be scared of the fact that there's not going to be a tailpipe on it anymore. And it's just brilliant. It's still online, so go look it up, because it's brilliant. I can't think of any other reason other than just marketing, really. And the Smart ED is on the market now, so anyone who wants a small car is going with the Smart, because the Smart's got a bit more of a reputation. It's a better known car. It's more conventional looking, and actually the Smart's better fit and finish compared to the Mitsubishi, and that's a really sad thing. I mean, our own Michael Thwaite recently went from a Mitsubishi to a Smart for 2, but when his lease came up on his i. So what's more to say? All right, let's have an ad break. We'll be right back, and then we'll be into part 3 of the show. Do you enjoy the show? Do you like wearing fun and unique clothes that support the things you love? Then you're going to want to head over to www.transportevolved.com/shop, where you can show support of Transport Evolved by buying one of our fabulous Transport Evolved branded apparel. We've got everything from hoodies and t-shirts to water bottles, badges and tote bags, and they'll be sent direct from our partners at Spreadshirt to your home address in double quick time. What's more, by buying something from our shop, you'll be sending us a little kickback as a thanks for our hard work on the show, and you'll get something unique and fun, and we'll get some warm fuzzy feelings knowing we can continue to bring you a great show every week. What's not to love? And we're back with part 3 of the show. We just got Ben there putting his glasses on. I'm sorry, Ben. It's because that shot, it's called a remove shot. So when it's finished playing that cart, it just removes and goes back to the previous shot. And I didn't switch to me quickly enough. So I'm to blame. All right, this week, Toyota unveiled a series of videos. Now, we've got to say, Mark's going to start scowling at this point because Mark hates hydrogen. And I'm teasing him just a little bit, but only a little bit. Toyota unveiled a series of videos this week going, look at how carefully and how lovingly we make the Mirai hydrogen fuel cell sedan. We do it so carefully. We do it so conscientiously. Everyone loves us. It's brilliant. But actually, it just shows that this car is a hand-built, limited production vehicle. Made by men in suits and ladies in suits, pretty much. Ben, have you ever seen a modern car produced in this way before?
Oh, no, not with the exception of, strange prototypes, that sort of a thing. Watching the video was kind of fun because in the videos, that car is absolutely gorgeous. The people, they're, really quality, paying attention to detail, which is great. I suppose if you had like a handcrafted wood dashboard or something, but kind of hard to make them in mass when you're taking that kind of time with it.
Yeah, and it just seems so weird that we've got a point where the car is supposed to be a production. Moderate production volume. We're talking about several thousand cars in the first year in the US, and then like 10,000 in the first couple of years. They must be losing their shirts on this car, Ben.
I would imagine. I mean, you got to make a lot of cars to make money at it, and then of course there's. Fuel cell cars are not exactly popular. I mean, in my area, in the Midwest, there's absolutely no place to fuel them up. And I mean, I've been a fan of hydrogen for a long time, ever since in high school science class, we did electrolysis of water, ran it into a balloon, and then we tied a string to the balloon, lit it on fire, and ran. And I comically dove behind the counters in the science lab, and we blew open every door in the lab with that hydrogen. It was a lot of fun. But hydrogen, it's not a fuel. It's an energy transfer medium. It's more like a battery than it is like electricity. And a couple of years back, this was before the Tesla Model S came out. I was at an event, and there was a GM guy there who was pretty high up. He was, big picture GM kind of a guy. And I said, so, tell me about fuel cell vehicles. How are they better than just an electric car? Because basically they're both electric vehicles. It's just the fuel cell uses the hydrogen, creates electricity, and goes. And with electric car, you just use your electricity to go. And I kind of cornered him and kept pestering him. And he said, well, basically, you can go longer on the fuel cells than you could on electric. And he quoted me at about 300 miles. Well, you can basically do that on a Tesla Model S now. So
with less losses.
I'm not seeing the appeal of fuel cell cars. I don't know, Mark. What's the cost of hydrogen fuel out by you right now?
Well, we will never, or at least we're not going to know now, because Toyota, for example, and the Honda before it, offers the fuel for free if you are so brave as to lease the car, which of course you can't purchase. So there is no honest accounting for the cost of fuel. That's where we are. I think a good use for hydrogen is the science experiment you had in your school, and you can see the power of it. But the reality of the vehicle is, if you're making fuel cell vehicles today, like we are told, folks make Rolls Royces with folks in white gloves polishing, expensive endangered wood. Then this is what you get. I think if that's all they've got, that's what they've got to try and sell to folks, is the notion that it's built with love and care. It will do nothing to solve the problems it's intended to solve if they can't market a mass vehicle. And I'm afraid we've thought that for a long time. They've made promises for a long time, and we're still in the same place.
And it's something. I mean, someone in the chat room said, "Why are we still talking about hydrogen?" Well, we're still talking about hydrogen because it's there in the industry. People are still trying to bring this technology to market. My personal views on hydrogen is that I don't see the point personally, but I would be negligent in my duties as a journalist, and I'd also be biased if I didn't bring the discussion to the table. And I think people have to make their own minds up about this technology. At the moment...
Absolutely. But let's mention one other thing, which is that I think, when the viewer asks, why are we still talking about hydrogen? The question really is, would we still be talking about hydrogen if, at least in the United States, and in Japan, I suspect, if the government, for some reason, didn't buy the notion that this was an effort worth making, that it was worth, kind of a NASA shot, a moonshot at making this technology work. In California, hydrogen vehicles get much more credit than an electric car in the zero-emission vehicle scheme that has done so much to bring plug-in cars to market. But at the same time, I think the case can be made that it has limited us to sub-100 mile range electric cars from major manufacturers, and induced them to continue working and throw a lot of effort and money at hydrogen fuel cell cars. And it's been backed up by tens of millions of dollars, maybe more, of state funding, that if it were not available, perhaps the industries themselves would cease to throw money at it and would get with the program of getting electric cars, real battery electric cars and plug-in hybrids on the road.
True. All right.
Yeah, I think somehow hydrogen just has some sort of a sexiness behind it. I mean, we had Arnold Schwarzenegger with the hydrogen Humvee. Who knows? Maybe the Koch brothers have some money invested in hydrogen right now. But for some reason, it's the strangest thing. People always seem to be interested in hydrogen, and I don't know. I build vehicles in my driveway, get them on the road using off-the-shelf technology. It's not rocket science. It's just amazing how well, that's the thing. But hydrogen is. So we've got all this great practical stuff that work. I can go down the street to there's a GM dealership. I can buy a Volt right now. I can drive it every day without using a drop of gasoline, without using any hydrogen, no matter where it comes from, and be done with it. But for whatever reason, there's still a lot of people interested in hydrogen. Go figure.
Well, there you go. All right, let's move on to our penultimate story, or almost our penultimate story, of the show. This is a solar-powered Tesla model, Tesla charging station, the supercharger station, but it's also attached to a new Tesla showroom and a new Tesla service center. This is in California, opened this week. Thanks to Green Car Reports for that photo that let us use this today. Interestingly, this photo is representative of something that Tesla's been promising for a very long time, which is all our superchargers will be solar powered. We will have solar powered stores. We will have solar powered service centers. Tesla hasn't really met that promise yet. And there are some people who are very upset with Tesla for that, not making it actually happen. Now, last week I drove from Norway back to London, so I passed through Sweden and Denmark, Germany, and Belgium, and France, and then back to the UK. And I actually stopped at a massive 12-car supercharger site, which has a massive solar panel on the roof, but it's just that. So this is the first where it has everything under one roof. Is this the sign that Tesla is now going to make good on its promise, or is this just another showy site, Mark?
Well, I'm certainly a big supporter of solar, and I think that wherever it's an appropriate, where it can be appropriately utilized, it should be. I'm not one who gets all huffy about promises for solar-powered charging stations, because I think the notion of a solar-powered charging station is itself a misnomer. The reality is these are grid-connected charging stations using the available electricity, resulting in cars driving that are much cleaner than the gasoline and diesel cars that they replace. And to the extent that in a cost-effective or non-cost-effective manner, you can get some of the electricity from the sun, fine. Or the extent to which you can use batteries to do load management, excellent. Do what makes the most sense. But I think that the prime project here is getting plug-in cars, electric cars on the road using electricity. It's really about the whole solar panel and electric car notion, and the one that Tesla is talking about all the time is a marketing device. It's real. It's better for some of the electricity to come from solar or wind, but people like the notion that it's solar powered electricity going into the car. And if you put up a few solar panels, everyone will say it's solar powered electricity. There's Adopt a Charger put in a charging station at a national park here in San Francisco, and there are visible wind turbines that do contribute somewhat to the power in the charging station. So everyone considers them wind-powered charging stations. I mean, the reality, of course, is much different. It's always a combination of the available renewable energy and the baseline grid energy. And it's all a good thing. I'm happy, I just feel, it's important for someone to disabuse folks of the notion that putting a few solar panels up at a Tesla charging station changes in any meaningful way the contribution that Tesla cars make to the environment.
There was a really interesting article this week talking about what's your true oil footprint. It's a concept I'd never come across before. The idea that everybody uses oil, even those of us who drive cars that don't consume gasoline, and the idea of what is your oil footprint. And they said, look, I think it was Forbes or someone else, the idea being that even if you're driving an electric car, let's pretend that we charge our cars using the dirtiest version of power there is, and therefore this would be the net effect. But I think everyone needs to understand that everyone consumes, everyone pollutes, even if you're living a super green life. So you're right there with the solar panels. I'm interested, though, with the announcement that was made a couple of weeks ago regarding the new batteries for homes. Elon Musk said in the Q4 2014 earnings call that Tesla was going to be working on these home storage battery packs. And I wonder if the introduction of solar panels on this site in particular is kind of the start of Tesla going, we're building the Gigafactory, we've got massive amounts of batteries coming off the factory line, or we will have in 2 years' time, and we're going to use those batteries to help us store energy so that we can have supercharging sites that don't impact the local grid. Ben, what do you say to that?
Well, I think this ties in really nicely with what we were just saying about solar. And in some ways, this isn't new. That's always been talked about. People have said, oh, what do you do with the old electric car batteries? Are they toxic and they just end up in dumps? And no, everybody said, well, they're still good. You just might not have as much range, but they'll get reused into stationary power systems. And I've actually played around with that a little bit, because when you think about it, all an electric vehicle is a big battery pack with a bunch of wheels strapped on it. And let's say you got a long commute. Let's say you drive an hour to and from work every day. Well, that's still 22 hours a day that your car is just parked somewhere, not doing anything. And it could be absorbing solar energy, or on the other direction, it could be providing electricity for something else. At my house, I have a 400-watt solar panel that I rigged up on my little girl's swing set, and I directly charge my electric motorcycle from that. And then I also rigged it up to a 48-volt UPS,
Wow.
like a computer uninterruptible power supply. And I call that my poor man's smart grid, because we've probably all heard of the concept of the smart grid or the vehicle to grid. Your neighbor down the street's using a lot of power. Your car's plugged in. Some of your power goes to him. But I don't think we're ever really going to get to that point, because you need the car companies, the various manufacturers, the power company, everybody working together. But on a smaller scale, for example, a lot of places have time of day rates. You may pay more for electricity during the day than at night. Well, if you have a solar panel, you're also making more electricity during the day than at night. So I think not just having a Tesla battery pack, but we're about this far away with somebody coming out with an appliance where you mount a Tesla battery pack to the wall of your garage. With it is a dedicated charger inverter. And maybe during the day when power costs are high, you run your entire house off of your Nissan Leaf or your Mitsubishi i or whatever you have. And then at night, when electricity is cheap, you recharge your car then. I'm planning on rebuilding my garage and putting solar panels on it. And I did the math, and I got it down to a 3 1/3 year return on investment. Wow. And not because of subsidies or things like that. It's electricity itself isn't that valuable. I mean, you can buy it cheap from the power company, but if it replaces money that you'd be spending on gasoline, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to put up as many solar panels as possible, charge your car, and then you could take that money and it could go towards a car payment or paying off a solar system or paying off your house or whatever. So right now I'm not in the market to go buy a Leaf or something like that. I'm in the market to rebuild my garage because it makes more financial sense. And then whatever leftover electricity there is, I can charge up and send down the street to my neighbors, and they get the benefits of solar energy as well.
One of the things I'm desperate to do when we move, and for those who are keeping track, we've just had our first part of the step of the emigration has come back. So we've got interviews and all sorts before we can move to the States. But ultimately, stateside, I want to build a house made of shipping containers, and I want it to have something similar to what you were talking about there, Ben, a UPS style backup system for the home. I don't think it will be completely off grid, but for those who are thinking about living in the Pacific Northwest would know, it's earthquake territory, big earthquake territory, and being able to have your own power supply would probably be a good thing. So that's what I'm working on, which comes very nicely. Oh, he's got a solar powered.
I was going to say I'm all for even a little bit helps. There's a lot of people who don't say, "Oh, I'm not going to spend $20,000 on some huge solar system." But here I'm talking to you on my no joke solar powered iPad. This is a solar panel that outputs 5-volt USB. And so I just plug my iPad into this in the window every day, and it's a small amount, but it's that much less electricity that I need to pull from the wall or get from a coal-burning power plant. So don't be dismayed if you don't have some big fancy solar electric system or anything like that. Every little bit helps. Even turn off the lights, convert to LEDs. Right now, I'm saving $20 a month on my electric bill since I switched over to LED light bulbs. I mean, right now, I have no lights on because it's during the day, and I can see just fine. So really, all those little tiny things, they really do make a difference.
It's interesting you say that, and I'm gonna completely destroy the illusion now. But this is an LED battery powered light that we use in the studio. And it just gets charged up when I can. I try and charge it up using solar power, but and it just sits there in the studio and provides backlighting for when we're doing the show. All right, this is the penultimate story of the show. In China, it's not uncommon for companies to give out massive bonuses at the end of every year for doing well as an employee. Now, one Chinese company this past New Year, which was obviously the end of last month, gave out Model S electric cars to its employees. They had to have been working with the company for 4 months, and then they got a Model S as a well done. Now, it's a little ostentatious, Mark.
Well, I salute them in that I think, Tesla has run into a little bit of a problem in China, which is they, I think, perhaps had hoped that China would really be a big part of their near-term sales. That the Chinese, they've got an extraordinary number and rapidly growing number of very wealthy folks. And in this country, it's, very wealthy tech folks who are taking to the Tesla. But there's, been a few problems. One, those wealthy folks in China tend not to drive their own car. And the Tesla is a car that's made for the driver, not for the passenger, clearly. And I think China is a country that's just getting used to the luxuries that we've had available to us in the West, if you're interested and can afford them. So that it seems to me people are going to have to pass through BMW, Maserati, all those other cars, Bentleys, before they get to the understanding of why a Tesla might be a better car, to say nothing of the issues in China with the grid and the availability of electricity. So I think Elon should be very happy to encourage companies to offer Teslas as perks or New Year's end-of-year bonuses. But I suspect the Chinese themselves would rather get a 7 Series BMW or fancy Mercedes-Benz because they're going to have perhaps some issues. And if they've got a driver, they're in the back seat that's fairly plain in the Tesla.
Yes. Although you can now get a Tesla with 2 seats in the back rather than 3. They have like an executive rear seat, which I understand was developed specifically for the Chinese market. But it brings me to the question. I'm going to ask you both the same question. If you were going to be rewarded in your job for doing well, for something that was sort of commensurate with a Tesla Model S, what would you want? Ben?
I would not turn down a Tesla Model S. It's a gorgeous car. When I got to test drive one, it was an absolute blast. And the salesperson I was with didn't say I couldn't put the pedal to the metal, so I did. And it was great. It's a fantastic car. There's all sorts of different cars out there, but I mean, it's a driver's car and it's all electric, and gosh, what's not to like about that? I mean, I guess all I'd do is add a trailer hitch to it, tow my camper or something like that. But that's about the only change I'd make.
Mark?
Well, I'd be happy to accept the Tesla. I would perhaps ask them as well to include the cost of widening the door to my garage so that I could fit the car in it. The truth is it's a crappy car for around town in San Francisco. Parking, dings, everything makes the iMeave, for example, a much better car to use in San Francisco. But would I like to do what a Tesla can do? Absolutely. I've got a wedding to go to in my niece in Colorado in September. And I would much rather drive there in a Tesla than any other way, or any electric car. Unfortunately, that's the only one that could do it. So if someone wants to get me a Tesla before then, I'd be happy to accept.
You see, I'm gonna throw the spanner in the works. I reckon 100,000 could get me a really decent solar system and 2 regular, normal electric cars for the family. So that would be what I would ask for. Well,
I have in presentations that I give about electric vehicles. I mean, I took a Geo Metro and I converted it to all electric for like $1,300. Now, granted, it's a very modest electric vehicle, but if you compared it to 130 for the Tesla Sportster, the difference is either me affording an electric car or not, or me and my 99 closest friends all having our own electric cars or just sharing one. But I'm right with you there. You always got to think about like what else you could spend money on. So I got to say I'm definitely not going to run out and buy a Tesla right now. I'm with you right there on the solar system, but I still wouldn't turn down that car.
No, and having spent 4 days straight in a Tesla, I can understand why. And the supercharger network was absolutely phenomenal. And thank you for Tesla for offering me the chance of doing that. There will be reports coming soon. All right, finally for the show, I want you to take a look at this, which is a weird ad from Japan, starring a villain from the Ultraman series and a grave idol, and it's about falling in love at a family mart involving electric car charging. Now, this is apparently quite normal for Japanese adverts on TV. They do have that kind of slightly weird, I don't mean to be rude, but it's certainly non-Western view of ads. So this monster offers her a coffee and she turns it down. She doesn't want the coffee. He then offers her flowers and she says no. And it turns out that the store clerk says to the monster, you need to impress her. You need to play her music. So we then are treated to this weird montage of monster playing music by the leaf. Love is then felt both ways, and it all ends with it's a happy ending. But it's the weirdest ad I've ever seen, but it's also super cool. What do you make of it, Ben?
I got to admit that although I do watch a little bit of anime, I don't quite get this ad. I don't. That's not my culture. Obviously, in the States, we sell a lot of cars with pretty girls and music. Not too many with mythical monsters.
No. Mark?
I have not got a clue what to make of it. If
brilliant. That's what it is.
So bizarre. But there is just a different sensibility in Japan about all of these sort of things, marketing and that this is an ad that will work to bring people to a family mart is extraordinary to me.
But you know what? It worked. It worked for me. Sorry to interrupt. It worked for me because we plugged in at a local charging station in Bristol the other day, and actually we plugged in and paid to charge because you were running a bit low. It's one of the few times you actually pay to charge, and it had one of those new style connectors on, and I was resisting the urge to hold it up and sing into it. So it worked, right? It works. But do check it out online. I don't pay the music because we've had trouble in the past. If you try and put music on, people then get upset, and then we get takedown notices for no reason other than discussing about it, and then it's a long and lengthy process and lots of form filling and everything else. Anyway, thank you very much, gents, for staying with me today. Where can people find out more about you, Mark?
Well, I would go to the Adopt a Charger site and see what I'm working on. And you can sometimes, though not for a while, see what I am thinking about at plugsandcars.blogspot.com. But that's been hasn't been updated in quite a while. So look at pluginamerica.org and adoptacharger.org.
Thank you very much. And Ben, thank you for joining us. Where
so
can
glad
people
to be
find
here.
out more about you?
Well, you can check out my blog at 300mpg.org, which actually I get that from the first time I took my electric motorcycle out for a spin. I tracked how much energy I used and converted to miles per gallon equivalent. Turned out it was over 300, and that was building a project with basically a library card and a set of socket wrenches. You can also check me out on YouTube, and I have a lot of my projects over on instructables.com as well.
Fantastic. And thank you everyone at home for joining us today. If you've been watching the live stream, thank you for sticking around. I know it's been a long show because we had like this half-hour break when I was trying to figure out what was going on with all the tech, but it's all ended well. You can find us at the usual place at transportevolved.com. You can also follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, www.youtube.com/transportevolved. You can talk to us on the Twitters. We are at Transport Evolve, because Transport Evolved is one character too long and Twitter still hasn't fixed that thing. I've got some great news coming up this week. We've got some fantastic stories already coming through the pipeline, including an Easter egg in the Tesla Model S, which has a James Bond theme and lots more. So we'll be writing about those tomorrow. Of course, Geneva Auto Show coming up this week, so we'll be covering that as well. And don't forget, on Friday, we've got our 10 news roundup. We've made some tweaks. We hope you like it. Until next time, folks, I'm Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, and don't forget to plug in. See ya. Bye.